now. Welcome back to the Deadology Podcast. From Pencil Hill Studio, New Paltz, New York, I'm your host, Howard Weiner. Today is March 12th, 2024. A couple days ago was the 43rd anniversary of my first Grateful Dead concert in Madison Square Garden. I was 17 years old at the time, and we'll take a deep dive into that epic concert tonight. That concert, as well as five other Madison Square Garden shows from that period, were officially released about a year ago in the In and Out of the Garden box set. So the shows were March 9th, March 10th, 81, September 20th, 21st, 82, and October 11th and 12th, 83. I was at all those shows except for the one on March 10th. But this episode of the podcast, which is Season 2, Episode 11, will focus on the March 9th show, and we'll also talk about the following night, March 10th, in Madison Square Garden. Before we dig into the music and the audio highlights of those shows, let me just tell you how I got into the Grateful Dead, how I ended up at this first show. I'm at an Islander game. The date is January 24th, 1981. I looked up the date, know it because it's a famous date in hockey history. I went to an Islander game. They're playing the Nordiques. They're losing by a goal in the third period. And my favorite hockey player, Mike Bossy, needed 2 goals to become the second player in NHL history to score 50 goals in the first 50 games of the season. Looked like it wasn't going to happen. But the man was a magician, great goal scorer. He scored 2 goals late in the game, the Nassau Coliseum, where I'd see many Grateful Dead shows in the future, was freaking going nuts. It was the most exciting thing I was ever part of in my life. And Islanders won the game. But that, as thrilling as that was, my life was changed on the ride home. My friend Seymour, Grateful Dead fan, put Europe 72 into the tape deck on the way home, turned it up loud, and we passed around a joint. And I heard that Cumberland Blues, and It Hurts Me Too, Jack Straw. I was blown away. It finally hit me that the Grateful Dead were more than just Casey Jones and trucking. There was a whole world of music, and I was on this night, I was taking the leap into it. It was so incredible what I was hearing, and especially Ramble on Rose. That was like the ice on top of the cupcake, whatever, however you want to put that, man. But the Ramble on Rose did it. I heard that, and I'm like, that's my favorite song in the moment. I was like, incredible. Next day, I went right down to Tapesville, USA on Route 59 in Nanuet, New York. Bought Europe 72 and a few other Grateful Dead albums. So by the time of the March 9th, 81 show, I had about 7 or 8 Grateful Dead albums. So I was still very much a novice. I didn't have any bootleg tapes. I talked to a few of my high school friends into going down to the show. They weren't even Grateful Dead fans. Good guys, but so I was like the experienced guy in the crew, 6 weeks with a few albums. We took a bus from the Nanuet Mall down to to Madison Square Garden, and it seemed like everything was working against me, like really having a shot of getting into this show, because we had weed with us, but it was weed that didn't have much THC. I mean, this stuff did not get you high. So back in those days, 1 out of every 20 bags you would score wouldn't be great. Nowadays, THC potency in pot isn't even an issue. But back then, occasionally you would get some weed that just didn't work out too good. So, and we're also sitting in the fourth, in the upper deck, in the mezzanines. So, and I had no Grateful Dead influence there to tell me what was going on. So, kind of everything was working against me, but didn't matter. We walk in during the first song, Feel Like a Stranger. I had no idea what song it was, but I just heard the jam and that exotic it was crazy, man. I'm just like, this is insane. It was like walking into the set of Hawaii Five-0 or something, man. It was very cool. And show rolls along, and what made the night for me, much more than anything else, was the fourth song. They did it. They played Ramble on Rose. And to hear the crowd roar when they did it just like New York City, and this is such a great, powerful version. It was speaking right to me. So I totally dug the Ramble on Rose. And I probably knew about 75% of the songs they played that night. The only issue was I didn't have any bootleg tapes, so they played, when they played Estimated Uncle John's in the second set, it was 26 minutes long. I knew Estimated, I knew Uncle John's. Combined, they're 10 minutes long off the album. And then throw in the drums in space after the Estimated Uncle John's, it was just like, it was way too much for me to even comprehend. It was like, walking into a foreign language movie and, not knowing a word of a foreign language kind of thing. But I still came away with such a great impression of the show, even though I wasn't close and I didn't get high enough and all that stuff. They ended the show with Good Lovin' and U.S. Blues, obviously songs that I knew. So that was very cool. So I definitely left on a very positive note. And I wouldn't understand how great this show was till about a month later. I started collecting bootleg tapes. And my friend Doug, who's been on the podcast before, he's at Pete Stoll's house, and they have the bootleg of the 3/9/81 March 9th show from the Garden. And I'm listening to it, and Althea's playing. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I was there for this song. I couldn't believe how great Althea was, what an amazing tune, and what a great version it was. So yeah, I just dug in, and the rest is history. Here I am, 43 years later, with a Deadology podcast and a bunch of Grateful Dead books written. It's amazing how this stuff just, I had no idea that it would have this kind of impact on my life. But geez, what a first show it was. So let's jump into that first show. Opens up Feel Like a Stranger and Althea back to back. So this is their new album, and my God, they could not have had a better promo asking people to buy their new album, because these two versions are insane. The way they sang the songs and the way the songs were performed were almost like studio-like perfect. It was just, they were brilliant song performances, and they had the bonus of having the improvisation right on the money. Garcia was on fire, and his guitar was turned up with like a certain tuning, with a certain reverb, unlike any other show. This show just so stands out. So the versions of Feel Like a Stranger and Althea, beyond perfect. And if I had to rate them, they're not the greatest of all time, but if I was listing my favorite Strangers and Altheas, these would fall into that like maybe 5 to 7, somewhere in that 5 to 7 range as far as being the best ever. Amazing versions. So right now, let's take a little listen to the ending of the Feel Like a Stranger. You could hear the amazing tone of Garcia's guitar, and the Grateful Dead stuck a perfect landing to the Stranger, which is very hard to do, but when they hit it, it's quite a thrill. Dig. that's how it all began for me. Feel Like a Stranger to open the show, and Althea, very hot Althea to follow. And the third song on this evening was CC Rider. And in 1981 and into 82, maybe 83, the Grateful Dead were playing these killer versions of CC Rider and Little Red Rooster. Jerry was really into the jamming on those songs, so this version is pretty awesome. And Bob Weir's singing on this night was exceptional. It was in the 80s. I mean, his voice, some of his singing got a little over emphatic and definitely theatrical. But on this night, when they come back to CC Rider after the hot jam, Bob just goes CC Rider. He did like 5 C's there, and it just hit the spot. So he was right on at this show. Excellent version of CC Rider. By the way, if you want to hear what I think might be the best CC Rider, I think it's Madison, Wisconsin, 12381, if I recall that correctly. I got to hear that one again. Also, New Haven, 42283. I was at that show. Played a killer CC. So moving on to song 4 is the beloved The Ramble on Rose, the song that I so desired to see. And man, there's always some kind of hook when you see the Grateful Dead in your first couple of shows and they're playing the songs that you wanted to hear. Just that Ramble on Rose did it for me. And this version happens to be one of the best. It's hard to say that something's as good or better than Europe 72, those versions, the one from the album, and there's several versions from that time period that are great. But Jerry's singing is so attentive here, and the New York City factor, the crowd going nuts, and that sound that you heard on the Feel Like a Stranger, the way his guitar was tuned that night, he just ripped this Ramble on Rose solo. It's like none other. By the way, this and other versions are on my Positively Garcia YouTube page, and I'll also get a couple of them up on the Deadology podcast Facebook group. Most of you know where to find this. Your favorite outlet for digging up Grateful Dead versions. So, great Ramble on Rose. Then you go to El Paso. Jerry's just picking away like crazy on it. Then the next song, Deep Ellum Blues. This was the second electric version of Deep Ellum Blues, a signature opener for Grateful Dead acoustic sets, as well as many Jerry Garcia con shows. But the electric Deep Ellum is pretty awesome. I think the Grateful Dead, they did it about 9 or 10 times. And this one's very cool, great version. Deep Ellum Blues. Then we're going back to Bob, Beat It On Down the Line. 8th song of the set, Bird Song. Now, at the last show, Cole Fieldhouse in Maryland, on March 7th, they played one of the all-time great Bird songs, a 17-minute version where Jerry just goes off and gets lost and jams forever on it. And very rare that they would play Bird Song back-to-back on consecutive shows, but I guess the Bird Song was still buzzing in his brain. Coming into Madison Square Garden, man, he's still thinking about the Bird Song from Cole Fieldhouse. And here they do like an 11-minute version, really well played, a lot of fluttering and picking, and Jerry doing his thing. Not quite, obviously it's not going to be as good as the Cole Fieldhouse one, but an excellent version of Bird Song. And the set ends with New Minglewood Blues. And if I have to have one little critique of the first set, it's just an okay version of Minglewood, nothing spectacular. They probably could have used a better ender for the set would have been perfect, just to make it, to put it in the direction of an all-time great first set. But the Minglewood's okay. The one unusual thing about it, and this whole show, the sound that's coming from the Grateful Dead, it's unique from any other show. It's like if I was on Name That Tune and they played 3 notes from this show, I would not only name that tune, I would be able to name the show. It's just some kind of distinct motif going on at this show. So they end with Minglewood Blues, but one of the cool things is the sound of Brent's keyboard here. Even that there, Just going for a completely different sound on this night, shaking everything up. And on this night, it's all working out, coming up aces. So we move on to set 2, and they thrill Madison Square Garden with a China Cat opener. And even from the beginning of this China Cat, Brent's chiming in, cutting in with some amazing funky organ playing. Just gives it a completely unique sound from any other China Cat. Kind of like the Scarlet Fire from Hartford that's on Dick's Picks, the October 14th, 83 version. Brent does some very cool stuff at the beginning that kind of gives it like a signature lick sound. And, he does the same thing here on this China Cat, unlike any other version. And then, they're playing the cat. It's going great. Everything, Jerry's singing. They're hitting everything right on. Then they go to the jam. And what happens here is just mind-boggling. There's more China Cat jamming in this version than any other. And that includes 73 and 74. Because on those versions from those years, you had the feeling groovy theme going on. And I'm not saying this is better than those versions, but that was almost like a segment that was a transition from China Cat to Rider. This is like 10 minutes of just straight cat jamming. It's crazy. So they move towards the crescendo kind of early here. Everything's going good, but Garcia pulls back a little bit. This version's insane. You got to listen to it. I'm going to play some of the Rider, but dig this out. Listen to this China Cat. So, it's moving along. They approach the crescendo, but they don't really go into it. So then they break it down and swirl and bring it back, and they're jamming again. It's cooking. And then they go towards the crescendo again, and it's better than before, but they really didn't hit it. Like when you're at a show and you're hearing China Cat and they hit that, we would call it a fanfare, a crescendo, the high point where the crowd goes nuts. This is the second time they approach it and almost do it and kind of do it. But, the band on this night is just, they got a mission to stretch out the songs and find things in there that you never heard before, and to just keep it going. We're not going to give you that straight out fanfare. We're going to make it much better than that. We're going to tease you and just keep the jam, just keep building the intensity. And then they approach it again, and it's more China Cat than you've ever heard before. And as they go into Rider, there's extra noodling before that starts. It's just unbelievably long and a completely great listen. But it's kind of fun. They deny you the thrill of the obvious fanfare that you expect to hear, and they give you something that's much better that you never could have expected. So very brilliant China Cat. And, they go into Rider. At this point, they give New York City what they want. This is rockin', stomping, rock and roll. This is as hot a rock and roll I Know You Rider as you want to hear. I'm going to play a sample of it. But it's amazing how they go from jazzy, unique playing to just, here we go, ram it down your throat, Madison Square Garden, feed off the energy, I Know You Rider. So here you go, a little piece of that, I Know You Rider, 3981 Madison Square Garden. The music is just bursting with energy and creativity on this night, 3981, by the way, which is a square root number. 3 times 3 equals 9, and 9 times 9 equals 81. So there had to be something was happening this night in Madison Square Garden, and the energy rolls into an excellent Samson and Delilah fully jammed out. The fourth song of the second set, and by the way, on this night they took no shortcuts. Every set, I'm thinking about the next night too, but all these sets from these 1981 shows are full, plenty of music. There's no easy 3-song before drums or 3 songs, see you later, good night. They're laying it all out there, giving it their all for New York City in 81. So at this point, they shift the momentum a little bit, do a beautiful ballad, Ship of Fools. I was excited to see that the night I was there. It was another song that I knew, and it was played kind of to what I might have heard on the album, but an excellent, well-sung version of Ship of Fools. Jerry's voice is sounding excellent on this night, and that kind of led to a little shift in the show. It went from like powerhouse rock and roll of Ryder and Sampson, and now they moved into a heavy jazz theme, which almost kind of goes back to the way they were playing China Cat earlier. Now we're looking at a 26-minute estimated profit into Uncle John's band. And I love both songs, but neither one of these versions is like a go-to version for me. But as a whole, this 26-minute estimated Uncle John's it's incredible. And that's the unusual thing. I kept listening to this show and the show from the following night, and I'm like, what is it about this version? It's like the songs are almost de-emphasized. When you're at a show, you hear estimated, you hear Uncle John's, you're totally into the song. But the jamming is so powerful in these versions, and almost intentionally they de-emphasize the songs themselves, or it's almost like the songs are, oh, by the way, we got to play the song so we can get back to the jam kind of thing. An incredible 26-minute estimated Uncle John, something you got to check out, just the way the band's playing. Everything, like once it's time for the instrumental, they just take off, and it's very jazzy. The band's listening to each other, a lot of great just improvisation, musical conversation going on. Then this nice long pre-drums go into drums in space, and then there's the other one on the other side, and Phil's bombing away at the beginning, and then it's right back to that. Even though it's kind of rocking, it's right back to that jazzy feel where Brent and Jerry are playing off each other. Phil will join in the conversation, and just what they're doing musically is incredible. So I'm going to play you just a little bit of this other one. It's like the Grateful Dead are at a jazz club. So this is really one of the amazing things about this show. They're at Madison Square Garden. The Grateful Dead know how to feed off Madison Square Garden energy. They know how to feed off Philadelphia Spectrum energy, give it back to the crowd, and it comes through in their playing. Here they are pulling the energy, but they're also kind of like ignoring it at the same time, kind of like Miles Davis turning their back on the audience, just like so into what they're doing from an artistic musician standpoint. That's what makes this show so unusual. It's just it sounds like they could be at a jazz club, just playing off of each other, and there's not 20,000 people there, watching them. So, this other one is like another great example of just how unique this particular show is. And then it all rolls into one. Stella Blue. Jerry brings the Madison Square Garden almost to complete silence. A really slow, thoughtful version of Stella Blue, deliberate. The outro solo it's pretty good. 1980 and 81 featured some incredibly hot outro solos for Stella Blue, but this isn't one of them from the Garden on this night, but just the way the control to go from such hot playing to bringing the Garden to a standstill, and everybody just stunned, hypnotized by the Grateful Dead, digging on Stella Blue. Then after Stella Blue, instead of transitioning to something like it around and around, Jerry's noodling a little bit, almost sounds like The Wheel, or maybe even they might go back into Uncle John's. But it's decided Good Lovin', last song of the night. And this second set by itself is 108 minutes. You can't fit it on a 90-minute tape, so it's exceptionally long. So they end the set with Good Lovin', and the encore is U.S. Blues. And as I mentioned earlier, I was very happy to hear these songs, which were pretty typical to end the show. But the U.S. Blues, I was just listening to this today. I listened to these 3/9 and 3/10 in this past week, 3 times each. Such great shows, and they definitely take up a lot of time. So it's been a good week for me listening to these shows and really getting into them. But the U.S. Blues is quite extraordinary. It was a really good version, a great guitar playing from Jerry, and Phil just bombing away at the end. Just the control he had, like where the rock gods to where Coltrane's and playing jazz. And then we're going to stop time in its tracks with a slow ballad. And then we're back to rocking. And they're just hitting everything 100% at this show. It's great show. My first show, Madison Square Garden. Most of it was over my head at the time, but can't say that anymore, man. I fully love the show, and it's well respected, and now it's been officially released. So 5 stars for 3/9/81. The following night in Madison Square Garden, 3/10, 5 question marks instead of 5 stars. Now, it's a very good show with a lot of great highlights, but it's one of the most unusual Grateful Dead shows, very odd sounding like the night before. So I think they set the precedent for this night with the opening song. They open up with the beloved Mississippi half-step, Uptown Toodaloo. And around this time, starting around 77, it was an epic song which went anywhere from like 12 to 18 minutes in Englishtown. Eventually got whittled down, and when Half Step joined forces with Franklin's, which is it's a great combo. But by this time in 81, a lot of the versions were 8 minutes or under, kind of in that range. It was like, if you don't finish this in 8 minutes, we're going to find the band's going to be fined or something. So they really kind of raced through Half Step back in these days. So they start the show with Half Step, and after the first verse, there's a big bang. I think Jerry's amp blows or something, and they scramble to fix it. Garcia gets the guitar going again, but that bang changed the whole trajectory of the evening. Definitely of the Half Step, but I believe of the whole evening. This is the way it's going to be. We're just going to go into uncharted territories here. So they get into the jam before the pre-Rio Grande between I'm on my way, the last verse of Half Step, and before the bridge into that pre-Rio Grande jam. And Jerry just goes, like, you could tell he's just dialing his guitar, trying to make sure everything sounds good, but he's taking it very leisurely, kind of enjoying that the amp's working, dialing in the sound. So it ends up being like a 3-4 minute jam, which was almost never heard of at this time period for the Dead. So this is an outlier version. It's over 11 minutes of Mississippi Half Step, a very cool version. And then it goes into Franklin's Tower, solid Franklin, so you're off to a great start here. They follow that up with Me and My Uncle, and it just ends, which I don't know how many standalone Me and My Uncles there are from like 1979 through the end of 1995, but this is one of them. And maybe that was partially due to the equipment or whatever, but they don't go into Big River or Mexicali. I forgot about that as I listened to the tape again. I was kind of surprised when that happened. So then you get Must Have Been the Roses, nice singing by Jerry on Roses, fourth song of the night, and then Little Red Rooster. And I'm a big Rooster fan, especially from this time period. This one doesn't have it. Not a good version of Rooster because there's so many great ones in '81. So Rooster. Then they play Don't Ease. Once again, unusual place to put Don't Ease Me in. I know they did it mid-set maybe a couple times in the 80s. In 1980, but obviously it was always a set ender. Here they throw it in the sixth spot. And then the show kind of regains balance. They do an excellent Weird jumps into Lazy Lightning, and this is a very good Lazy Lightning supplication. So now the show is kind of back on track, very hot, very desirable combination there. So Lazy Lightning, supplication, very good version of Brown Eyed Women. Now it's kind of rolling along in a pretty typical fashion. Looks Like Rain is next. And Looks Like Rain is the type of song, I've just heard it so many times. These days, for many years now, I'm not in love with Looks Like Rain. But I'm listening to this version. And they hit the Rain, Rain, Go Away part. And that little instrumental where the Dead jams a bit and then Bobby comes back. On this version, it's insane. It's beautiful. It's like maybe 90 seconds, but it's unlike anything you've ever heard before. Just another little beautiful nuance from these Madison Square Garden shows where they were just reaching for something that they'd never done before. And the sound is just so different from any other shows you're going to hear. So I would definitely recommend checking out that Looks Like Rain. I'm not a big proponent of saying listen to this Looks Like Rain, but this one is just tremendous. And then they end the set with Deal, and it's a bit of a clunker. Not a great deal. They actually played a very good one. The last deal they did at the Cole Field House, a better version than this one. So that they end with Deal, but there's a lot of about that first set. Desirable songs. You got the Half Step Franklins, Lazy Lightning, Supplication. But not as this night wouldn't be as consistently hot as Madison Square Garden. But just when you think you're counting something out on this night, they come back out of nowhere. So they're definitely inspired in New York City. So set two, what one more desirable start can you get than Scarlet Fire? But once again, here's the 5 question marks of this show. I'm going to play the end of this fire for you. But Scarlet's rolling along pretty good, but nothing's overheated. It's not very hot or anything, but they're digging in. They're playing long. It's like a nice 11, 12 minute Scarlet. The outro jam's pretty good. They go into Fire, and the first 10 minutes of this Fire, they're playing, and it sounds like they're building towards something, but nothing's really happening. It's so strange because if the Dead are not having a great night, and it's kind of like an off situation. It will be a shorter version. Here it sounds like they're intentionally just dragging it out, trying to see if they can find something they never found, kind of deconstructing the song so they can reconstruct it. And anything that the first 20 minutes or so of this Scarlet Fire is missing, they make up for it with this jam right here. This is the last solo of Fire on the Mountain from 310-81. An impressive ending to that Scarlet Fire. And I'm sure you noticed that there was no Scarlet Begonias coda to that where they usually do. Just everything about these two nights in Madison Square Garden is reshaping, kind of almost playing with audience expectations and, artistically the band having fun amongst themselves in Madison Square Garden, which is kind of nuts. So you got the Scarlet Fire to open the second set, and then they go into Bob Weir's beloved combo from the Go to Heaven album, Lost Sailor's Saint of Circumstance. And we run into the same exact thing. It's like a motif building here. Just when you count us out, when it sounds like we didn't play the song you want, boom, here's the fireworks. As Jerry just did on that last Fire Jam. So it's a good version of Sailor. Saint of Circumstance is going along. Everything's as it should be. They go into the jam. Everything's materializing. Jerry's smoking. And then Weir just jumps in and cuts him off. It's very unusual. But it was almost like it was part of the motif of the show that he should do that. So it's like he cut in way too quick. And then Jerry kind of responded with some high notes, almost like rebuffing what Weir did. And then they do the go for it for sure, but I'm going to go for it for sure. They sing that, and it's, going along. And then when that's over, Jerry just comes back from the point where he was cut off as he was doing the previous jam. I've never heard anything like this in any Saint of Circumstance. It's crazy. So it's almost like he just picked off exactly where Weir cut him off. And they get into this great little Saint jam after they've pretty much finished the song. Definitely nothing like this that's ever been approached in a Saint of Circumstance. And once again, just like, the band just salvaging the song, almost deconstructing it on purpose to salvage it in front of Madison Square Garden. It's not like they're on a loosey-goosey West Coast show or something. They're in front of Madison Square Garden, 20,000. So, check out the end of this Saint of Circumstance, unlike anything you've heard. Strange things were happening in Madison Square Garden on these two nights in March of 1981. So the Saint of Circumstance goes into drums. There's like a little bit of an extended jam there with like hints of Saint, some more weirdness, drum space. Then we break into the wheel, nice intro into the wheel. And then that segues into China Doll, another one of the great songs from Reckoning that became electric. Obviously it was electric, but when they came out with Reckoning, they brought a lot of songs back into the rotation. Like I mentioned earlier, Deep Ellum, which went from acoustic to electric, Bird Song, which obviously was an electric song earlier, but because they played it for the Reckoning album, it was now back in the lineup. Same thing with China Doll. By the way, Reckoning was pretty close to coming out. It was recorded in October. Most of the stuff was recorded in October of 1980. It came out on April 1st, 1981, so it still hadn't been out yet. At this point, it was the next album up. So we got a Wheeled, and this China Doll is awesome. I listened to it today. I was like blown away by how good this China Doll is. So Wheeled, China Doll, but they still got the mellow flow going. So here we are at this point in the second set: Scarlet Fire, Sailor Saint, Wheel, Doll after drum space. And it's been a pretty mellow show. They really haven't rocked Madison Square Garden like they usually would, even though there's definitely a lot of very worthwhile and unusual stuff there. And then they break into trucking after China Doll. And they really nail the jam there. And, and then they mentioned New York, and the place is going nuts. So now we're taking on a new tone. Finally, in the second set, it's going to be some straight out rock and roll. And after that trucking jam, they break off into a little blues jam for about 3 minutes. Parts Smokestack, parts Spoonful. On the officially released thing, they don't label it as anything. It's just like trucking into Sugar Magnolia. And it's definitely not trucking. There's a separate jam. It's about 3 minutes. It should be labeled something. It should be Spoonful or just Blues Jam or just Jam, whatever. So it's trucking, jam, and then they break into Sugar Magnolia. And boy, when I've been listening to this, I've rewinded it a few times. This is a killer Sugar Magnolia. So you get this show where they're kind of playing around. They're almost a little understated through a lot of set, even though there's some great playing. It's just like it's almost like a subdued New York City show. Then all of a sudden it's like wham bam, truck and Sugar Mag, and it just goes to show that they were on this night, but just for whatever reason they were choosing to play it a certain way coming up to this point. Because man, they blew the roof off Madison Square Garden with this Sugar Mag. It's so great. I think I'm gonna download this and upload a version to my Positively Garcia page, which isn't there yet. Definitely one of my favorite Sugar Mags from 1981, and I really didn't even know how good it was till I got ready for this podcast and kept re-listening to these shows. The Sugar Mag is stunning, man. Garcia just does some great stuff on that jam, and at this point, they've totally changed the chemistry of what's going on. And it's once again, such a long show. They're not taking any shortcuts here. There's no not fade away, wharf rat, around and around kind of thing going on here. It's all, we're going to take our time and, we're going to lay it all on the line for New York City in our own distinctive way on this night. So we get to the encore and a very, very hot version of Satisfaction, which, the Grateful Dead version, it's definitely different than the Rolling Stone version, but there's something very cool about it. It's like a relaxed coolness to the way they did Satisfaction, and this is a very good version. And then they followed up with Broke Down Palace, once again going from rock to the ballad to the beautiful Broke Down Palace, perfect way to leave Madison Square Garden. But after all those songs, once again to do a double encore, just showed how much they were into it, and on one hand totally into it, but not giving the crowd exactly what they want. Just which the Grateful Dead never kind of did that thing, but they just played such artistic shows. When I think of these March 9th and March 10th shows, unbelievable. I love these shows so much, and it just grew on me, especially this March 10th show. With the little flaws there, it's still just amazing music to listen to. I just kept listening to it over and over, and if I wasn't amazed by what was going on in this show, I couldn't do that. But yeah, God bless the Grateful Dead. It was a great way for me to start my my Grateful Dead career on March 9th, 1981, and I think that wraps up this episode of the Deadology Podcast, episode 11 of Season 2. I'm your host, Howard Weiner. Thanks for listening, and peace out.